Ontario, and then made his move at some point to Springfield, Massachusetts, where he invented the game of basketball as a winter sport to keep, at the time, young men occupied because it was too cold for outside activities. Then, of course, in Canada, the first ever NBA game took place here in Toronto, about a mile away at the Maple Leafs Garden, ironically known as the Cathedral of Hockey. And that arena is still essentially in place roughly a mile from where we're standing today. Basketball then, at least NBA basketball, ceased about a year later after that opening game when the Huskies played the Knicks, and then came back to Toronto 50 years later. I'd say thanks to David Stern, then of course the commissioner, and John Bitove, who was a gutsy entrepreneur in electing to invest his money and time together with his partners in believing in basketball and the NBA. A few years later, Larry Tannenbaum became the principal owner of the Raptors, and he was later joined by Bell and Rogers as his partner in the team. So as I said, this is truly a homecoming, that here we are all these years later with our first finals game ever outside the United States, and for the first time here in Canada. So we're thrilled to be part of it. And just to add a few more words on the vision of Dr. Naismith, his vision extended not just to physical activity, but he was a Christian missionary. And for him, it was mind and body. And it's interesting, it's in essence come full circle, because here we are in 2019 and have become particularly focused on the mind aspect as well. And that is the mental wellness of our players and the young people, boys and girls, who are learning to play this game and learning about physical fitness and health and wellness. We also owe Dr. Naismith a lot in terms of his vision for global popularity, because shortly after he invented the game in 1891, he and other Christian missionaries brought the game overseas and brought the game to China, throughout Asia, and to Europe. And it's why in 1936, basketball became an Olympic sport. And in essence, the rest is history. And here we are today with very much a global sport, one of the most popular sports in the world. And 25% of the NBA is comprised of players who were born outside the United States, and probably not coincidentally, because we placed a team here in Canada, that the second country after the United States in terms of nationality for players is Canada. And we have, I think, 13 players at the moment from Canada who play in the NBA. And if you look at the two teams, I think there are 7 players, the two rosters together, who were born outside the United States, so roughly 25% of these two rosters, which is consistent with the ratio for the overall league. So I am absolutely thrilled to be here in Toronto to start our finals. I think we've had really a fantastic playoff, some of the best competition we've seen in a long time, and once again, I appreciate all of you being here, so happy to answer any questions.
We'll start here on second row on the left, Doug Smith.
Adam, it's Doug Smith, the Toronto Star. Getting back to that global popularity, you have Masai Ujiri and his ties to Nigeria, Serge Ibaka, Republic of Congo, Pascal Siakam, Cameroon, Amadou Gallo Fall was named Basketball Africa League president. Is that where you see the next great growth of the game on that continent? And can you speak to Canada's impact and Masai's impact on that plan?
So we have, I believe, 4 players on these two rosters who were either born in Africa, to your point, or had a parent that was born in Africa. And of course, you have Masai Ujiri, who was born and grew up in Nigeria. And so I think it absolutely speaks to the opportunity across the roughly 55 countries of Africa. I think it's one of the places we're looking in the world where we see enormous opportunity. Certainly China as well. We're opening with games in Mumbai, India for the first time next season. But in Africa, we've elected to launch a league, which will be starting in March of 2020 with 12 clubs. The format will be more like a Champions League, so sort of the best of Africa playing in club competition. But we see enormous opportunity. I think it's ultimately, it's because of the transformational nature of digital media, where, in Africa, a continent of over 1 billion people, where there are something like 700 million cell phones, 400 million of which are smartphones. So it's been revolutionary in terms of the people of Africa's ability to watch our games in real time, on handheld devices. So we see enormous growth opportunities, both in terms of players and for participation, and ultimately an interest for the league.
Second row on your right, Adam. Tim?
Tim Reynolds with the Associated Press. Adam, hello. You mentioned China in answering Doug's question. These are unique political times, obviously. There is a tariff situation going on right now. The World Cup is, 3 months away. The Lakers and the Nets are going to China again, as the NBA has gone for a long time. How concerned right now is the NBA about the state of politics with regard to the U.S.-China relations, particularly the tariff issue, knowing that the league does so much business to and from there?
We've been in constant touch with the Chinese Basketball Association. I've talked to Yao Ming directly about it. I am not concerned at this time. Of course, we're not immune from global politics, so it's something we're paying a lot of attention to. I look, though, to sports, and this is something Yao and I have discussed, where we can use basketball maybe in the way ping pong was used in the days of Richard Nixon, that there could be something called basketball diplomacy, and it is an area where our two countries have excellent history of cooperation, where we work closely with the Chinese Basketball Association on player development, referee development. We've talked a lot to Yao, Mark Tatum and I have about the rules, the constitution that underlies his league, and how to create greater competition. So I think with the World Cup of basketball coming to China in September, with our continuing to play preseason games there, with the attention on our finals right now, I see it as an opportunity, again, to demonstrate to people that through sports there's commonality, and we can use the values of sports, hopefully, as a positive force to continue to bring people together.
First row on your left.
Yeah, hi, Dan Williams, CGTN. It's almost a continuation of that question, just in terms of what more can be done in terms of bringing more popularity to the game, expanding the game in China. How important is that? And is there an update at all on the potential of a regular season game in China in the future?
What I believe we can do more of is work directly with the Chinese Basketball Association. Again, that's something that I've talked a lot to Yao about. In fact, for our summer league in Las Vegas, the Chinese national team for the first time will be participating in the summer league. So I think that's an important sign. I also think we are in the process of building academies in China to help develop the young players there. Again, I think because of Yao's experience in the NBA, he sees how it's done, not just in the United States, but in other places in the world. And I think he understands that given the enormous number of young people, boys and girls, playing basketball, there's more that we can be doing to develop elite players. In terms of overall popularity, we have a terrific media relationship with Tencent. Alibaba has a highlight, in essence, relationship with us. And of course, one of the co-founders of Alibaba recently bought into the Brooklyn Nets and is on a path to be the controlling owner there. So Joe Tsai has joined our board of NBA China. He's made a lot of really great recommendations to us about what else we can be doing in China, both from a media standpoint and from a participatory standpoint. So I think, although we're incredibly popular in China, there's a lot more we can be doing.
Fifth row on the left, Dan.
Adam, Dan Wecke with the Los Angeles Times. You have two franchises in the Clippers and the Knicks that are involved in a pretty nasty lawsuit over an arena project. Is there anything
4 players on these two rosters who were either born in Africa, to your point, or had a parent that was born in Africa. And of course, you have Masai Ujiri, who was born and grew up in Nigeria. And so I think it absolutely speaks to the opportunity across the roughly 55 countries of Africa. I think it's one of the places we're looking in the world where we see enormous opportunity. Certainly China as well. We're opening with games in Mumbai, India for the first time next season. But in Africa, we've elected to launch a league, which will be starting in March of 2020 with 12 clubs. The format will be more like a Champions League, so sort of the best of Africa playing in club competition. But we see enormous opportunity. I think it's ultimately it's because of the transformational nature of digital media, where in Africa, country of, a continent of over 1 billion people where there are something like 700 million cell phones, 400 million of which are smartphones. So it's been revolutionary in terms of the people of Africa's ability to watch our games in real time, on handheld devices. So we see enormous growth opportunities, both in terms of players and for participation and ultimately an interest for the league.
Second row on your right, Adam. Tim?
Tim Reynolds with the Associated Press. Adam, hello. You mentioned China in answering Doug's question. These are unique political times, obviously. There is a tariff situation going on right now. The World Cup is, 3 months away. The Lakers and the Nets are going to China again, as the NBA has gone for a long time. How concerned right now is the NBA about the state of politics with regard to the U.S.-China relations, particularly the tariff issue, knowing that the league does so much business to and from there?
We've been in constant touch with the Chinese Basketball Association. I've talked to Yao Ming directly about it. I am not concerned at this time. Of course, we're not immune from global politics, so it's something we're paying a lot of attention to. I look, though, to sports, and this is something Yao and I have discussed, where we can use basketball maybe in the way ping pong was used in the days of Richard Nixon, that there could be something called basketball diplomacy, and it is an area where our two countries have excellent history of cooperation, where we work closely with the Chinese Basketball Association on player development, referee development. We've talked a lot to Yao, Mark Tatum and I have about the rules, the constitution that underlies his league and how to create greater competition. So I think with the World Cup of basketball coming to China in September, with our continuing to play preseason games there, with the attention on our finals right now, I see it as an opportunity, again, to demonstrate to people that through sports there's commonality and we can use the values of sports, hopefully, as a positive force to continue to bring people together.
First row on your left.
Yeah, hi, Dan Williams, CGTN. It's almost a continuation of that question, just in terms of what more can be done in terms of bringing more popularity to the game, expanding the game in China. How important is that? And is there an update at all on the potential of a regular season game in China in the future?
What I believe we can do more of is work directly with the Chinese Basketball Association. Again, that's something that I've talked a lot to Yao about. In fact, for our summer league in Las Vegas, the Chinese national team for the first time will be participating in the summer league. So I think that's an important sign. I also think we are in the process of building academies in China to help develop the young players there. Again, I think because of Yao's experience in the NBA, he sees how it's done, not just in the United States, but in other places in the world. And I think he understands that given the enormous number of young people, boys and girls, playing basketball, there's more that we can be doing to develop elite players. In terms of overall popularity, we have a terrific media relationship with Tencent. Alibaba has a highlight, in essence, relationship with us. And of course, one of the co-founders of Alibaba recently bought into the Brooklyn Nets and is on a path to be the controlling owner there. So Joe Tsai has joined our board of NBA China. He's made a lot of really great recommendations to us about what else we can be doing in China, both from a media standpoint and from a participatory standpoint. So I think, although we're incredibly popular in China, there's a lot more we can be doing.
Fifth row on the left, Dan.
Adam, Dan Wecke with the Los Angeles Times. You have two franchises in the Clippers and the Knicks that are involved in a pretty nasty lawsuit over an arena project. Is there anything the NBA can do to help iron that out? And what's just sort of your general impression of the Clippers project?
I've talked to Jim Dolan and Steve Ballmer about that lawsuit. Obviously, it's not something you like to see between partners in the NBA. I don't think there's a role for the league at the moment, but it's something that we're paying a lot of attention to, and there may be an opportunity at some point for us to help create some sort of reconciliation. But right now, it's existing sort of outside of NBA governance. I'm sorry, the second part of your question?
Your general impression of the Clippers trying to build a new arena in Los Angeles and having sort of two arenas in that market.
In terms of building another arena, I'm very supportive of Steve Ballmer. I mean, putting aside location for a second, they are probably third or fourth on the list of tenants currently at Staples. I mean, that's just a function of their lease. Everybody understands that. I think from a league standpoint, if you had both teams in the playoffs plus successful hockey team there, it becomes very difficult for us for scheduling purposes. So, I mean, I don't, in terms of the overall marketplace and the concert marketplace, I can't speak to that, but maybe purely out of self-interest for the NBA, it would be helpful to have another arena in town.
7th row on the left, third in. Tim, if you could raise your hand so I see you.
Tim Bontos from ESPN. Adam, you've talked a lot about the possibility of creating a midseason tournament of some kind. Do you have any sense of where you're at with the Players Association in terms of coming to an agreement on that? And do you sense any interest on their part in doing so?
Tim, I think it's much too early to have a real sense of where we are with the Players Association, only because we're in the early planning process of investigating whether there really is an opportunity. To your point, it would need to be negotiated with the Players Association. I've had very general discussions with Michelle Roberts about the notion that these are the kinds of things we're looking at. I think she, of course, is supportive of looking at any ideas we have to build the business over time, but there's nothing concrete that we've brought to the Players Association and said, you know, is this something you'll support?
Standing on the right-hand side.
Good evening, Commissioner. Matt Cullen with CBC Radio Canada. As you know, Canada is traditionally a hockey country. Love hockey from the start. However, things have changed a little bit this year, and I think mostly Canadians will be watching the NBA Finals instead of the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time ever, I think. How does that affect the way you and the NBA do business, especially north of the border?
You know, I don't think about hockey per se. I mean, I'm a fan. Gary Bettman worked at the NBA years ago when I first started, and so we're generally supportive of other sports. And the way we look at sort of NBA or our programming is that we're competing against everything else on every other channel, every other form of entertainment. So we don't necessarily focus on where hockey stands vis-a-vis the NBA. So I'm paying attention to the Stanley Cup, and so I think it's a big country, Canada. You know, there's plenty of opportunity. We've learned in the United States, even though right now we're not the most popular, at least measured by television ratings, we have a very strong business. So there's room for lots of competitors, and actually I think it's good for everyone when sports continue to do well.
Thank you.
4th row in the middle. Joe, if you could wave your hand. Thank you.
Joe Varden, The Athletic. I have a question about Dan Gilbert and the Cavs. The family has asked for privacy with his health situation, but from a league perspective, are you at all concerned in his ability going forward to carry on?
I'm not concerned about his ability going forward. I, of course, am concerned with his present condition. I mean, I don't know a lot more, but obviously it's public knowledge that he has a medical condition. So our thoughts and prayers are with Dan and his family. And, you know, we're just wishing that he has a complete recovery, and I have no reason to believe he won't.
2 down from Joe. Michael?
Adam, Michael Grange from Sportsnet. Given the surge around this team and the way the whole country kind of seems energized, at what point would there be any consideration to a proposal for another team in Vancouver, Montreal perhaps, or you know, generally an expansion?
My answer is, you know, it's the same as it's been for other U.S. cities that have expressed interest, and that is that we are just not in expansion mode at the time. I mean, you know, we're flattered that some other Canadian cities have expressed interest, as some other U.S. cities have. But, you know, again, nothing new, and I've said this before, that we, meaning the NBA collectively, all our team owners are very focused on creating the best possible competition among the 30 teams. And I'm sure inevitably at some point we'll turn back to expansion, but it's not on the agenda at this time.
Is there one thing that would sort of get you into expansion mode? Like, what would be the criteria you're examining?
At the end of the day, from a league standpoint, you're in essence selling equity in your overall league, and you're selling a portion of the growth opportunity outside of that market. You're selling the growth opportunity in Africa. And I think what we would be looking at is whether, if we're expanding, not necessarily the short-term benefit of an expansion fee, but is it additive over the long term? Is that franchise adding something to the footprint of the league that the 30 current teams don't? So that's, in essence, would be the analysis.
5th row in the middle, blue jacket. Robert?
Robert Littell, BSO. There's been a lot of conversation about fan conduct. For the most part, with something like the Drake situation is more entertainment, but throughout the year there were several situations where players were fined and fans were banned from arenas. Is there something that the league can do to make sure that the players are feeling safe and in a good environment, and that the fans feel like they still can be active and heckling, but within reason?
What I think we can do is refocus our efforts, as we have this year, on appropriate conduct for fans and making sure that there's a clear code of conduct that's communicated to fans, that it's consistently enforced in every NBA arena, and that we're creating a safe environment, of course, for the players and all the other fans as well. And as I said, we've redoubled our efforts. We've had lots of conversations directly with the Players Association and the players, because absolutely we want them to feel that they're in a safe environment, and we don't want them to be distracted during the game or think that they have to take matters in their own hand. And I actually think, especially not just looking at this year, but over my tenure in the league, things have gotten much, much better in our arena than they were in the old days. But there's always room for improvement.
All right, eighth row at the back on the left. Mark, if you could raise your hand, please. Thank you.
Mark Spears, ESPN's Undefeated. Kind of going on Robert's point, I was curious to what you thought about what happened in Utah with Russell Westbrook, and you guys let the Jazz handle it. Did you think about jumping in and getting more involved, perhaps publicly, with that? And is there anything that the league could do from not just a safety standpoint, but even from a racism standpoint, where things that people say that cross the line can't be tolerated?
Well, Mark, to the latter part of your question, I think there's always more we can do, and I think standards in society have changed in terms of what's appropriate for people to say. As I've said before, I think there is a legitimate expectation that you go in, you buy your ticket, you go into an arena. I'm always searching for the right word, called heckle. That people would say, yes, you're allowed to, yell and scream when a guy's on the free throw line or whatever else. But then there's something else that we call it hate speech, which is clearly impermissible. And I think the issue is, if we just made a list, we know we wouldn't capture everything. And there's some aspect of when you see it, and it's also some words that otherwise aren't incendiary. It's the way they're said, or if they're said in a threatening manner. And so we spend a lot of time talking to security people, ushers in arenas. And a lot of our arenas now, most arenas now, they even put up text hotlines so that a fellow fan can communicate to the arena if somebody next to them is bothersome. So I think, as I said, there's more we can do, but we're very focused on it. In terms of Utah, I did not see a need to step in, only because we have such tremendous confidence in the Miller family. And Gail Miller, as the principal owner, I thought by her taking the court prior to the following game, speaking directly to the people in that community and saying this does not represent our community, I think that was much more powerful than me issuing a statement from all the way across the country in New York. And again, I think they handled it very well. I did speak directly to that team, to the entire team. I wanted to make sure they were satisfied with the way it was handled. They seemed to be satisfied as well. So again, these are incredibly unfortunate incidents, but I also want to send a clear message to those small, tiny minority of fans who might engage in that sort of conduct, that it absolutely won't be tolerated, and also that we're going to catch you. Because in every one of our arenas now, not only are there numerous high-definition cameras pointed at stands, so we're going to see it, but also there's 18,000 fellow spectators who are holding high-definition cameras in their hands. And so there aren't many incidents now when a player points something out and says somebody did something where we're not going to be able to get tape and see exactly what happened and ban that fan from the arena if necessary. Yeah, I spoke directly to the players on that team, as a team. I told them that I appreciated the way that they had handled it, and that it was not going to be tolerated in the NBA, and that we also appreciated the way they had come together with management and ownership of that team, and I thought their response was spot on.
Standing in the back, raise your hand. Thank you.
Back here, Joseph Cacharo, The Score. Adam, earlier in the postseason, coaches and players discussed some concerns they had with the fact that 7 technicals over the course of the postseason leads to a suspension. Is that something the league has thought about changing, whether it's resetting it after every round, or are you content with the way that rule works right now?
I'm content with where we are right now. Our competition committee is always looking at issues like that. I mean, you can see why we wanted to have strong disincentives for recidivists. And I understand when you get into that critical game, multi-rounds in, that all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, look at the impact that technical or flagrant is now having on that player's ability to remain on the floor. But we do believe you need strong disincentives. And one of the things that we look at is that since we adopt those rules, we think those new rules have been effective in reducing that sort of behavior on the floor. So if there's a less dire way of creating the same results, of course we'd be interested. And that's the sort of thing that, Kiki Vanderway and the competition committee, when the season is over, sit down, do the analysis, look at the data. Players participate in the competition committee as well, and we think about whether there's another way to do it.
Fourth row on the right on the end.
Hi, Commissioner. Lucas Meyer, News Talk 1010 Toronto. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions stemming. I know you discussed this at All-Star break with regards to the situation that happened with the Dallas Mavericks. But what also stemmed from that was a broader overview of the rest of the teams in the league. Can you say confidently that the other organizations in the NBA are essentially what we saw in Dallas and that corrosive atmosphere? Can you confidently tell the fan base that what happened in Dallas is really not happening in the other organization in the league? And just a quick yes or no, if Mark Cuban has completely paid the $10 million that he was pledged to donate to women's groups?
In terms of my level of confidence, it's high. We put in place several procedures post that incident in Dallas, and that includes regular direct reporting from the teams, confidential hotlines, analyses in conjunction with the league office on the hiring practices of each team. So you can never have absolute certainty, but I believe if there was another situation like that, it would have come to our attention. In terms of the $10 million, the last I looked, and my information may be a little bit old, he had donated $5 million of the $10 million so far and was working with the league office on his plan for contributing the additional $5 million. And I'll just add that in our discussions with Mark, he's not including sort of other donations he's making. Probably if they're, in terms of his pool of money that he's been donating to similar causes outside of sort of the league 10 million, he's over the 10 million. But he's been completely cooperative. I mean, it's Kathy Behrens from the league office has been working directly with Cynthia Marshall on targeting particular groups and ensuring that the money is appropriately spent. So I feel very good about, from a compliance standpoint, that Mark has done everything we could have asked of him.
But just a quick follow-up. I mean, on the specific $10 million, though, that was...
The specific $10 million...
Given his amount of wealth, do you think that at this point that he should have paid it off by now?
No. As I said, he's given plenty of money to other organizations as well, and it's being done in a sort of a thorough way of vetting each group and consideration. So not at all. And I think it's, I think giving away money should be done in a serious manner and in a deliberate manner. And so not at all. And there was, I think our only understanding with Mark is that there would be a process for doing it, and there is. And as I said, we've been working directly with him.
We're going to take two more. We'll start with eighth row in the middle. Mark.
Mark Berman, New York Post. Getting back to the fans, what was it about Drake's fandom that caught the NBA's radar?
As I said before, I mean, everything is a bit context specific. I think in the case of Drake, as I've said before, I mean, we certainly appreciate his superfan status, and I know he's beloved in the community of Toronto. I think certainly we don't want fans, friend or foe, contacting an NBA coach during a game. I think that even as Nick Nurse later said, I didn't even realize it was Drake, or hardly was aware that I was being touched. And I think those can lead to dangerous situations. If you're in the middle of coaching a game and you're completely focused, you obviously don't want somebody who's not on your team touching you. And I think that, and we understood that in this case, given Drake's relationship to the team, it's not the same as just any fan who happened to be courtside touching a coach. But I think that's an absolute bright line that we have to draw. So that's one example. And I'd also say, that I think the issue for the league is that he has this ambassador type role with the team. So he is viewed a little differently than any fan sitting there. But at the same time, I think there are appropriate lines that shouldn't be crossed in terms of how a competing team is addressed, or the officials for that matter. And as I said, I mean, we league office had conversations directly with Drake and his manager, and I think we ended up in a good place.
Final question, third row on the left, Jason.
Commissioner Jason Winnick of Dallas Sports Source. Back with international, how much of a bigger boon is this finals for the league from an international perspective than perhaps most people realize?
Interesting question. I'm not sure. I think symbolically having our first finals outside the United States maybe has a big impact on countries that follow the NBA but don't have teams. Whether that be in Asia or whether that be in Latin America. So I think as we look back in time at the NBA calendar, I mean, this clearly is a marker of sorts that here we are, 2019. Our Game 1 of the finals taking place in Toronto, Canada. Will I think be a milestone. And as I said, it's come full circle in terms of basketball being invented by a Canadian. So I think it also demonstrates, Jason, that this goes to the question before about what we look at for expansion. That I think that the fact that we expanded to Canada has had a direct impact on the level of interest in this country, more so than just if people were watching our games on television or through some other form of media. And I think it's why, as I said, second to the United States, we have the most players from Canada than any other country.
All right, thank you, Adam, and thank you all for being here. We'll have transcripts available shortly, and they'll be posted on Media Central. Enjoy Game 1.
That was the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, making his annual pre-finals press conference and availability to the media back on the floor here at Scotiabank Arena with Sean Powell from NBA.com. We can run through the litany of topics here in a moment, but for you, what, if anything, stood out in particular from the questions and answers for the commissioner?
Well, I think Adam has a sense of pride about the reach of the NBA. The first time the NBA Finals is in Canada, outside the U.S., also in a multicultural city like Toronto. You could just look at the fans, the makeup of the fans, look up at the makeup of the Raptors themselves, led by an African. You have Pascal Siakam, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, and also it's taking place the same time this summer where you'll have the Chinese national team playing in Las Vegas for the Summer League, and also the NBA just announced that they're going to have a professional league in Africa. So really, this is about expansion, in a sense, expansion of the game, but we will not see another expansion team in the NBA. Not in the league. You know it comes up every year.
Yeah.
Someone's going to ask, hey, well, it's a big hit in Canada. Are we going to go back to Vancouver? He got that question.
Right.
And I think Adam Silver pretty much put that to rest.
I believe unofficially this was about the 25th straight press conference in which Adam Silver has been asked about expansion, either abroad or domestically, and he said, quoting here, we are, quote, not in expansion mode, and that has been the case when he's been asked about it over the last few years. If you need any evidence of how global the game is, the fact that we're here outside the United States for the NBA Finals, that's a bit of evidence. Just go to a press conference also where guys like Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol are answering questions in multiple languages. Ibaka addresses the media in 3 languages routinely here, English, Spanish, and French as well. He gave Canada some love, went out of his way to do that in his opening remarks, starting with the inventor of basketball, Dr. James Naismith, born right here in Ontario. As you mentioned, went on to talk about the growth of the game, particularly in Africa, where the league is sponsoring a professional league beginning next March. He called it one of the places of, quote, enormous opportunity. And then he went into China, and he was asked an interesting question, I thought, by Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press about the political situation brewing between the United States and China, tariffs, etc., and how that might impact, for instance, the United States' participation in the World Cup coming up in September, or that Chinese national team coming to Las Vegas in July. The reality is we don't really know, but he said he felt like we could have something similar to what happened back in 1972, I believe it was, under President Richard Nixon, where they sent table tennis players to China in what was then known as ping pong diplomacy. And I think Adam Silver just coined the term basketball diplomacy.
Yeah, that would be a big hit for the NBA because Adam Silver and his predecessor, David Stern, spent so much time reaching into China because that is a fertile land for the NBA. You know, the people there, the young people, they love the game. The NBA has expansion games over there, and they're always a big hit. So he's going to keep an eye on the political climate. That's going to affect the NBA if it's negative. If it's negative, if it goes in that direction.
It is often said, I don't know if this is true, but I love the statistic, that there are as many people in China who play basketball as there are Americans.
Wow.
Which is mind-blowing, right?
That's a
300 million people who participate in the game at some level or another. Obviously, it's an enormous market to tap and a very popular game there already. Similar in India, where the NBA is going for an exhibition game in Mumbai. Another billion people and potential customers for the NBA and fans for the NBA. He did speak briefly again about this idea of a mid-season tournament, which he's obviously intrigued by, similar to what is done in European soccer. And he was asked specifically about the Players Association and their thoughts on it, and basically said, we don't know yet. We haven't had that conversation.
Yeah, it's really in the early stages right now, Matt. I think it's just pretty much on the drawing board. He's got to take the next step. He's got to talk to the Players Association. It's got to fit in the scheduling. And I also think it's got to be a format that's easy for the fans to follow along, and also that the players buy in. You know, in the NBA, I think you see the trend of players resting and everything. They've got to be motivated to play that tournament. They've got to have a good reason to. And the coaches have to have a good reason to give those players permission to play.
Also asked about a lawsuit between parties representing the New York Knicks. It's more complicated than the way I'm going to describe it, and the LA Clippers, involving property, specifically the old Forum, the fabulous Forum where the LA Lakers used to play and is now owned by the Knicks group, suing the LA Clippers over a proposal for a new arena for the LA Clippers. And he basically said, we're staying out of that for the moment, understandably. And then he was asked a couple different questions about fans, particularly the Utah Jazz situation, where a fan was banned for life for abusive and racist language directed at Russell Westbrook during a game. His response to it, the Jazz's response to it publicly. Gail Miller spoke before the next game. Adam Silver spoke to Jazz players about that as well, and basically said there's no blanket way to guard against this sort of thing, but he was satisfied with the way it was handled.
Well, I think he's also satisfied in that there are, 18,000 fans in the arena who are against that also, and that's a good sign. So basically, they're policing themselves. Yeah. They've got the cell phone cameras. They can point out fans, abusive fans, and it's really, it's not a bad look for Utah, because by and large, those fans are, they're polite, they're doing well, but it's always a couple, that gives them a bad name. I think Gail Benson did a good job coming out the very next game. And Gail Miller. Yeah. And also Adam spoke with the team just to reassure them that, hey, is everything okay? He got back a positive response, and so we move on.
And one of the last questions the commissioner was asked about, and you knew it was coming, was about Drake and the conversation that the league had with Drake, the global ambassador here, obviously a megastar and super fan for this team, because of his actions getting on the floor, touching his head coach, Nick Nurse, and basically said, no more touching. Do not touch the head coach. That is a line you cannot cross anymore.
Yeah, I think they like Drake in the arena.
Sure.
Because he brings different fans in. He adds something to it. But yeah, there's a line you can't cross. And by the way, that line is painted on the floor.
Yes.
If you don't know where it is. I don't think you'll see it. At least we hope we don't see it again. Hopefully he'll just sit down and root for the Raptors, and everything will be fine, and we'll all be reciting Drake lyrics, and except Klay Thompson.
Except for Klay Thompson. Well, exactly. Some of them he was okay with. Some of them he's going to skip during the NBA Finals. That conversation took place before Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Drake tonight rocking the Del Curry jersey. Interesting choice for him. Number 30, Curry played the final 3 years of his NBA career here, and now his son returns to the 6 for Game 1 of the NBA Finals. A look at Jurassic Park outside. They are just getting warmed up. So are we. Our Game 1 coverage continues right after this.